The summer heat shimmered across the Arizona territory like liquid silver, distorting the landscape into a dreamlike mirage of red rock and endless sky. Marcus Thornfield rode his weary Mustang along the ancient trading trail that connected the scattered settlements of the Southwest, his weathered face squinting against the relentless Sunday. The year was 1885, and Marcus had spent the last 15 years as a drifting cowhand, moving from ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to put down roots or form lasting friendships. His horse, a sturdy bay named Ranger, picked his way carefully through the rocky terrain of Devil's Canyon, a place most travelers avoided due to its reputation for Apache raids and hidden dangers. But Marcus needed to reach Tucson before the cattle auction, and this route would save him 2 days of hard riding through even more treacherous desert. The silence of the canyon was broken only by the soft clop of Ranger's hooves and the distant cry of a hawk circling high overhead. Marcus had learned to read the subtle signs of the desert during his years in the territory, the way shadows fell differently when danger was near, the particular quality of silence that preceded trouble. Today, something felt wrong. As he rounded a bend between towering sandstone walls, Marcus heard something that made him rein in his horse and listen intently. It was barely audible above the whisper of wind through stone, a low moan, almost human but so faint it could have been the canyon itself sighing. Most men would have dismissed it as imagination, but Marcus had learned never to ignore his instincts in Apache country. Dismounting quietly, he led Ranger toward the sound, his hand resting loosely on the grip of his Colt .45. What he found tucked into a narrow cleft between two boulders made his breath catch in his throat. An elderly Apache man lay crumpled against the rock face, his traditional clothing torn and blood-stained, his weathered face gray with pain and exhaustion. The old man's eyes opened at Marcus's approach, dark, intelligent eyes that held depths of wisdom earned through decades of survival in this harsh land. Despite his obvious pain, there was no fear in those eyes, only a resigned acceptance of whatever fate this white stranger might bring. Marcus had heard enough stories of Apache torture and scalping to make most cowboys shoot first and ask questions later, but something about the old man's dignity stayed his hand. Blood seeped from a wound in the elder's leg, and Marcus could see the swelling that indicated a serious break. The man's lips were cracked with thirst, and his breathing came in shallow gasps that spoke of internal injuries. Without water and medical attention, this Apache elder would be dead by sunset. Marcus knelt beside the injured man, noting the fine beadwork on his shirt and the carved turquoise ornaments that marked him as a person of importance among his people. The elder watched Marcus's face intently, searching for signs of intention, kindness, or cruelty, mercy or violence. "Easy there, grandfather," Marcus said softly, using one of the few Apache words he had learned during his years in the territory. The old man's eyes widened slightly at hearing his own language from a white man's lips. Without hesitation, Marcus unslung his water canteen and gently lifted the elder's head, letting cool water trickle between the cracked lips. The Apache drank gratefully, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face, as if trying to understand what manner of white man would show such kindness to a traditional enemy. The Apache elder spoke in his native tongue, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the unmistakable cadence of authority. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone. This was a man accustomed to command, to respect, to having his words carry weight among his people. "I wish I could understand you, old father," Marcus said gently, continuing to give the elder water in small sips. "But I can see you're hurt bad, and that's a language any man can read." Marcus examined the leg wound more closely, noting the torn flesh and the unnatural angle of the bone beneath. It was clearly a break that would require splinting if the man was to have any chance of healing properly. The blood loss was significant but not immediately fatal with proper care. The elder might survive, but care meant staying in Apache territory far longer than was safe for a lone white man. Marcus knew the stories of what happened to cowboys caught by Apache war parties, had seen the results of Apache justice more than once during his years in the territory. Yet looking into the old man's eyes, he saw not an enemy but simply another human being in desperate need of help. Marcus made his decision with the quick certainty that had kept him alive through 15 years of frontier life. He began gathering materials from the canyon floor, straight pieces of deadwood for splints, strips of cloth torn from his own shirt for bandages, anything that might help stabilize the elder's injuries. As he worked, the Apache spoke again, this time with obvious effort. To Marcus's surprise, some of the words were in English, heavily accented but clearly understandable. "You. Help. Enemy," the elder said, his voice rough with pain and wonder. Why? White man. Show. Mercy. Marcus looked up from his makeshift medical preparations, meeting the old man's gaze directly. Because you're hurt, and I'm here, he said simply. Doesn't matter what color we are when blood's flowing and bones are broken. The elder studied Marcus's face for a long moment, then spoke again, his English improving slightly as he remembered words learned in trading sessions decades ago. I am Manuelito, war chief of Red Rock Band. My people. Think me dead by now. Marcus's hands stilled for a moment. Manuelito, the name was legendary throughout the territory. This was one of the most feared and respected Apache leaders, a man whose very name could empty a saloon or send settlers fleeing to the nearest fort. And here he lay, broken and helpless, dependent on the mercy of a drifting cowboy. Well, Chief Manuelito, Marcus said, resuming his work with steady hands. Let's see if we can't prove your people wrong about that. Setting the bone was a brutal process that left both men exhausted. Manuelito bore the pain with stoic dignity, his only concession to the agony being the white-knuckled grip with which he clutched a piece of leather Marcus had given him to bite. When it was done, Marcus fashioned a crude but effective splint using dead wood and torn cloth, then helped the chief into a more comfortable position against the canyon wall. Water? Scarce here, Manuelito warned, accepting another careful drink from Marcus's canteen. You give too much. You die. In desert. Marcus checked the level in his canteen, calculating how long his remaining water would last in the brutal heat. The chief was right, sharing water meant both of them might die before reaching help. But Marcus had made his choice, and he wasn't the kind of man to change his mind when things got difficult. Got enough for both of us if we're careful. Marcus lied easily. Besides, you know this country better than I do. Once you're strong enough to travel, you can guide us to water. As the sun climbed toward its merciless zenith, Marcus used his own body to provide shade for the injured chief, ignoring the sweat that poured down his face and the growing ache in his parched throat. Manuelito watched this sacrifice with growing amazement, clearly struggling to reconcile his lifetime of experience with white men against the reality of this cowboy's selfless actions. In my 70 winters, the old chief said slowly, I have fought. Many white soldiers, many settlers, all came to take Apache land, Apache freedom. You are different. Marcus shifted slightly to keep the shade covering Manuelito's face. Can't speak for other white men, Chief. Can only speak for myself. And I was raised to help folks in trouble, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. Your father teach you. This way? A shadow of old pain crossed Marcus's weathered features. My father died when I was 12, killed by claim jumpers who wanted our little ranch in Texas. It was an Apache woman who found me half dead in the desert afterward, gave me water, food, pointed me toward the nearest town. Never knew her name, never saw her again, but she saved my life when she could have left me to die. Manuelito's eyes widened with something approaching wonder. Apache woman, saved you? Changed my whole way of thinking about your people, Marcus admitted. Made me realize that good and evil don't have anything to do with the color of a man's skin or the language he speaks. They have to do with what's in his heart. The old chief was quiet for a long time, his intelligent eyes studying Marcus's face as if seeing him for the first time. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of decision that would echo through both their lives. My people have saying, Manuelito said carefully. One kindness creates sacred bond. That time cannot break. You have created such bond with Manuelito. As the day wore on, Marcus rationed water between them with careful precision, giving the chief slightly larger portions, despite Manuelito's protests. The heat was becoming dangerous, and Marcus knew they couldn't remain in the exposed canyon much longer without risking death from exposure. Can you ride? Marcus asked as afternoon shadows began to lengthen. If I help you onto my horse, do you think you could stay in the saddle long enough to reach help? Manuelito tested his strength, attempting to sit up straighter against the rock wall. The effort left him pale and shaking, but there was determination in his eyes. I can. Try. But your horse cannot carry 2 men. Far in. This heat. Then I'll walk alongside, Marcus said matter-of-factly. Ranger's strong, and I've walked plenty of miles in my time." The look that crossed Manuelito's face was one of profound emotion, gratitude, respect, and something deeper that transcended the barriers of race and culture. In that moment, an unbreakable bond formed between the Apache war chief and the drifting cowboy, a connection that would reshape both their destinies. Getting Manuelito onto Ranger's back was an ordeal that tested both men's endurance. The chief's broken leg made mounting impossible in the normal way, so Marcus had to carefully lift the injured man while Ranger stood patient and still. By the time they were ready to move, both men were exhausted, and Marcus's water supply was nearly gone. "Which way?" Marcus asked, taking Ranger's reins and preparing to lead the horse on foot. Manuelito pointed toward a narrow gap in the canyon wall that was barely visible among the shadows. "There, old trail, leads to it in a hidden spring, 2 miles, maybe 3. Marcus nodded and began walking, leading his horse with its precious cargo through the brutal afternoon heat. Each step was an act of faith, faith that the spring existed, faith that they would reach it alive, faith that his choice to help an enemy would somehow prove to be right. The hidden trail Manuelito directed them toward was little more than a deer path, winding through narrow passages between towering rock walls that trapped the heat like an oven. Marcus stumbled frequently on the loose stones, his legs weakening from dehydration and exhaustion, but he never paused or complained. Behind him, Manuelito swayed in the saddle, using every ounce of his strength and will to remain conscious and upright. "Not much farther," the chief whispered, though Marcus could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. The old man was suffering more than he let on, and Marcus could see fresh blood seeping through the makeshift bandages on his leg. As they rounded another bend in the narrow passage, Marcus heard something that gave him hope, the soft musical sound of water moving over stone. Following Manuelito's directions, he led Ranger through a final gap between boulders and into a hidden grotto that took his breath away. The spring bubbled up from deep within the earth, creating a small pool of crystal-clear water surrounded by green grass and wildflowers that seemed impossible in this desert wasteland. Ancient petroglyphs covered the surrounding rock walls, telling stories of Apache ancestors who had used this sacred place for countless generations. "Holy water," Manuelito said reverently as Marcus helped him down from the horse. "My people have protected this place for 500 years. No white man has ever seen it before." Marcus understood the magnitude of what the chief was sharing with him. This wasn't just a water source, it was a sacred site, a closely guarded secret that could mean life or death to Apache bands traveling through the harsh desert. By bringing him here, Manuelito was showing trust that went far beyond simple gratitude. Both men drank deeply from the pure spring water, feeling strength flow back into their bodies with each swallow. Marcus refilled his canteen and wet his bandana, using the cool cloth to clean Manuelito's wounds while the chief rested in the shade of an ancient cottonwood tree. "Your horse, Uema, needs water too," Manuelito observed, watching Ranger drink gratefully from the pool. "Ranger's been a good partner," Marcus agreed, running his hands over the Mustang's dusty coat. "Carried you gentle as a mother with a baby, even though you're a stranger to him. Animals, no good hearts," the chief said with conviction. "Your horse trusts you because you worthy of trust." As evening approached, painting the grotto in shades of gold and crimson, Manuelito's strength began to return. The water and rest had worked their healing magic, and though his leg was still badly injured, the immediate danger of death had passed. "My people will be searching for me," he said, his English becoming clearer as he recovered. "When Sunday sets tonight, they will see smoke signals from watchers on high peaks. If I do not answer, they will know I am dead or captured." Marcus looked up at the narrow strip of sky visible above the grotto walls. "Can you make a signal from here? Let them know you're alive?" Manuelito smiled the first time Marcus had seen any expression other than pain or stoic endurance on the old chief's face. "Apache signals? Not just smoke. We have other ways to speak across distances." The chief reached into a leather pouch at his belt and pulled out a small, polished piece of metal, part of an old army mess kit, Marcus realized. Positioning it carefully to catch the last rays of sunlight, Manuelito began flashing signals toward specific points on the canyon walls, using the reflected light to send coded messages that would be visible to Apache lookouts miles away. Within minutes, answering flashes began appearing from distant peaks, like stars winking in the gathering dusk. Marcus watched in fascination as an entire conversation played out in silent pulses of light, a communication system that the cavalry had never learned to interpret. "They come," Manuelito said with satisfaction. "My war party will be here before midnight. They thought I was dead." 3 days now, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling desert air. In a few hours, this peaceful grotto would be filled with Apache warriors who would find their missing chief in the company of a white man. The possibilities for misunderstanding and violence were enormous. As darkness fell over the hidden grotto, Manuelito seemed to transform before Marcus's eyes. The wounded, helpless old man gave way to the legendary war chief, his voice gaining strength and authority despite his injuries. "You must understand," Manuelito said seriously. "My warriors will come ready for war. They think white soldiers captured me, maybe tortured me. When they see you with me, their first thought will be to kill. Ask questions after." Marcus checked his weapons instinctively, then forced himself to relax. "What do you suggest, Chief? I can't outrun Apache warriors, and I won't leave you here defenseless." "You will not need to run," Manuelito said with quiet certainty. "I will speak for you. Tell them what you have done. But you must trust me completely. Any sign of fear or hostility, and they may strike first." The waiting was the hardest part. Marcus sat beside the spring, listening to every sound the desert night offered: the hoot of an owl, the scurry of small animals, the whisper of wind through stone. Manuelito lay propped against the cottonwood tree, occasionally flashing signals toward the canyon walls to guide his approaching warriors. Just before midnight, Ranger raised his head and nickered softly, the first sign that other horses were approaching. Marcus felt his heart begin to race, but Manuelito's calm presence kept him steady. "Remember," the chief said quietly, "show no Apache fear, Apache respect, courage above all else. You have shown courage in helping me. Now show it in facing my warriors." The first Apache appeared like a shadow materializing from stone itself. One moment the grotto was empty except for Marcus and Manuelito. The next, a painted warrior stood at the edge of the pool, his rifle trained on Marcus's chest. More warriors followed, emerging from hiding places that Marcus would have sworn were impossible to access. Within moments, 20 Apache fighters surrounded the grotto, their weapons all pointed at the white man who sat calmly beside their wounded chief. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and Marcus could see the hatred burning in several pairs of dark eyes. The war party leader, a younger man with the bearing of someone who had inherited command in Manuelito's absence, stepped forward and spoke rapidly in Apache. His tone was urgent, angry, and Marcus caught enough familiar sounds to understand that questions were being asked about the white man's presence. Manuelito answered in the same rapid Apache, his voice carrying absolute authority despite his prone position. Marcus watched the faces of the warriors as their chief spoke, seeing expressions change from hostility to surprise to something approaching wonder. The conversation continued for several minutes, with various warriors interjecting questions or comments. Marcus sat perfectly still, understanding that his life hung in the balance of Manuelito's words and the warriors' willingness to believe their chief's account. Finally, Manuelito switched to English, apparently for Marcus's benefit as much as to demonstrate his command of the white man's language. "I have told them," he said clearly, "how you found me, broken and dying, in Devil's Canyon. How you shared your water when you had little. How you set my broken leg and brought me to sacred water that no white man has ever seen." The young war leader, introduced as Cochise, named for the legendary chief, stared at Marcus with undisguised amazement. When he spoke, His English was halting but understandable. My chief says, you give water from your own mouth. When he was dying of thirst. This island. Apache way. To help wounded enemy. It's the human way, Marcus replied simply. At least, it should be. Cochise translated Marcus's words for the other warriors, and a murmur of discussion ran through the group. Several of the younger fighters still looked skeptical, their hands remaining close to their weapons. But the older warriors, men who had fought alongside Manuelito for decades, began to show signs of acceptance. My warriors, Manuelito continued, want to know why you risk your life for Apache chief. They say, white men usually kill wounded Apache, not help them. Marcus considered his words carefully, understanding that his answer would determine not just his own fate, but potentially the relationship between these Apache and white settlers for years to come. Chief, he said, meeting Manuelito's eyes directly, I've seen enough killing in my 35 years to know it doesn't solve much of anything. When I found you broken and bleeding, I didn't see an Apache war chief or a white man's enemy. I saw a human being who needed help, and I was raised to give help when I could. Manuelito translated, and this time, the discussion among the warriors was longer and more intense. Marcus caught fragments of Apache words he recognized: honor, courage, sacred bond, and understood that the chief was explaining concepts that went to the heart of Apache culture. Cochise approached Marcus more closely, studying his face in the firelight that one of the warriors had kindled. You know what Manuelito means to our people? He asked. I know he's your chief, and I know he's a great warrior, Marcus replied. But mostly, I know he was hurt and needed help. He is more island than chief, Cochise said seriously. He island, keeper of our sacred songs, holder of ancient wisdom. Without him, our people lose part of their spirit. The young war leader turned to address his warriors in Apache, his voice rising with passion and conviction. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the emotional weight behind them. Whatever Cochise was saying was having a profound effect on the gathered fighters. When the speech ended, an extraordinary thing happened. One by one, the Apache warriors approached Marcus not with hostility, but with something that looked remarkably like respect. Each man touched his own chest, then extended his hand toward Marcus in what was clearly a gesture of recognition and honor. They give you warrior's greeting, Manuelito explained, his voice thick with emotion. This honor, rarely given to white men. They say, you have Apache heart in white man's body. The ceremony continued as each warrior spoke his name to Marcus and received the cowboy's name in return. It was a formal introduction that carried deep significance in Apache culture. By knowing each other's names, they became bound by the laws of hospitality and mutual respect. When the last warrior had completed the greeting, Cochise made an announcement that caused excited discussion throughout the group. He says, Manuelito translated, that you will be taken to our main camp as honored guest. The full council of elders must hear this story and decide what honor is due to man who saved our most sacred chief. Marcus felt a mixture of honor and apprehension. Chief, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not sure it's safe for a white man to visit an Apache camp. There might be others who don't share your warrior's generous view of what I did. Manuelito's eyes flashed with something that might have been amusement. White man, he said with growing strength in his voice, you have already done most dangerous thing possible. You trusted Apache chief with your life. Compared to that, visiting Apache camp is simple. Matter of courtesy. Number. Part 7. The journey to the Apache stronghold took 2 days, traveling through hidden trails and secret passages that Marcus would never have imagined existed in the harsh desert landscape. The warriors had fashioned a travois for Manuelito, allowing the injured chief to travel in relative comfort while his leg healed. Marcus rode ranger, but now he was surrounded by an honor guard of Apache fighters who treated him with a respect that bordered on reverence. As they traveled, individual warriors took turns riding beside Marcus, practicing their English and asking questions about white settlements, farming techniques, and the world beyond the reservation. Marcus found himself serving as an informal ambassador, sharing knowledge while learning about Apache customs and beliefs in return. "You surprise us," said a young warrior named Grey Wolf as they navigated a particularly treacherous mountain pass. "We expect white men to fear Apache." "You do." "Neither. Fear and hate take too much energy," Marcus replied, guiding Ranger carefully around loose stones. "I'd rather spend that energy on understanding and friendship." Grey Wolf translated this for the other warriors, and Marcus heard approving grunts from several of the men. It was clear that his attitude was as foreign to them as theirs had initially been to him, but the mutual respect was growing with each mile they traveled together. On the second afternoon, they crested a ridge, and Marcus got his first view of the Apache stronghold that few white men had ever seen. Hidden in a box canyon surrounded by nearly vertical cliffs, the village was a masterpiece of natural defense and careful planning. Wikiup's traditional Apache dwellings were scattered among groves of cottonwood trees, while horses grazed in natural meadows fed by several springs. The sight that greeted their arrival was one Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. Word of their approach had preceded them, and what seemed like the entire population of the village had gathered to witness the unprecedented arrival of a white man as an honored guest. Men, women, and children lined the trail, their faces showing curiosity rather than hostility. At the center of the gathering stood an elderly Apache woman whose bearing immediately marked her as a person of great importance. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the resemblance between her and Manuelito, the same intelligent eyes, the same proud carriage, despite her advanced age. "My sister," Manuelito explained as they approached. "Ayana, She Island, medicine woman, and keeper of our tribal memory. Her word carries great weight in all councils." Ayana stepped forward as the travois bearing her brother was brought to a halt, her experienced eyes immediately assessing his condition and the quality of Marcus's makeshift medical work. She spoke rapidly in Apache, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having her medical opinions respected without question. "She says," Manuelito translated with obvious pride, "that the white man did good work, setting my leg. She says, bone will heal, straight and strong, because of proper care given in first hours." The medicine woman turned her attention to Marcus, studying his face with the intensity of someone reading a complex text. When she spoke, her English was surprisingly fluent and precise. "I am Ayana, sister to Manuelito, and voice for the spirits of our ancestors," she said formally. "My brother has told me of your actions in Devil's Canyon. Such kindness to an enemy is rare in any people, white or Apache. You honor the sacred bonds that connect all living things." Marcus dismounted and approached respectfully, understanding that he was being introduced to one of the most important people in Apache society. "Ma'am, I'm honored to meet you. Your brother is a remarkable man, and I was glad to help when he needed it." Ayana's eyes crinkled with what might have been amusement. "You speak as if what you did was ordinary, as if any man would choose to risk his life for a stranger. This humility is another mark of true character." The formal greetings continued as Marcus was introduced to the various leaders and elders of the band. Each introduction carried weight and ceremony, marking his transition from enemy outsider to honored guest. But Marcus could sense that greater ceremonies were yet to come. That evening, the Apache held a great council around a central fire that seemed to bring the entire canyon alive with dancing shadows and golden light. Marcus sat in the place of honor beside Manuelito, who despite his injuries had insisted on attending the gathering that would formally recognize the cowboy's actions. Ayana served as the primary speaker, her voice carrying clearly in the desert air as she recounted the story of Marcus's rescue of her brother. But this wasn't just a simple retelling, it was a formal integration of the event into Apache oral tradition, ensuring that the tale would be preserved and passed down through generations. In the time of the Great Drought, she began in the ritualistic tone used for important stories. "When the white soldiers pressed hard upon our people and trust between the races had withered like grass in summer heat, there came a day when the spirits tested both Apache and white man to see what dwelt in their hearts." Marcus listened in fascination, as his simple act of mercy was transformed into something larger, a bridge between peoples, a demonstration of the universal bonds that could transcend racial hatred. The story gained power and meaning as Ayana told it, becoming not just an account of what happened, but a teaching tale about honor, courage, and the possibility of friendship between enemies. When the storytelling concluded, the council entered into formal discussion about what honors should be accorded to Marcus. Various elders spoke, each adding their perspective on the significance of his actions and what response was appropriate, according to Apache tradition. Finally, an ancient man whose age seemed to rival the canyon walls themselves rose to speak. This was Nyack, the eldest of the elders and final arbiter of important tribal decisions. His voice was thin with age but carried absolute authority. The council has decided, he announced in careful English, that Marcus Thornfield has performed an act of such honor that it creates sacred obligations. According to our oldest laws, a life saved creates a bond that cannot be broken. But more than this, by choosing mercy over hatred, kindness over fear, he has shown himself worthy of adoption into our tribe. Marcus felt his breath catch. Adoption into an Apache band was an honor so rare that he could count on one hand the number of white men who had ever received it. However, Nyack continued, we understand that you have your own life, your own path to follow. Therefore, we offer you a different honor, that of sacred friend. You will be welcome in any Apache camp for as long as the mountains stand and the rivers flow. You will have the protection of our warriors and the wisdom of our elders whenever you have need. The old man gestured to several younger warriors, who approached carrying an elaborately decorated lance. The weapon was a work of art, carved wood inlaid with turquoise and silver, hung with eagle feathers and painted with symbols that Marcus didn't recognize but could feel were sacred. This is the lance of sacred friendship, Nyack explained. It has been carried by only 3 men in the last 100 years. When you display this lance, any Apache who sees it will know that you are under our protection and worthy of our respect. Marcus accepted the lance with hands that trembled slightly from the weight of the honor being bestowed upon him. The weapon was beautiful beyond description, but more important was what it represented, a bond of trust and friendship that transcended everything he had thought he knew about the relationship between white settlers and Apache tribes. I don't know what to say, Marcus said honestly. This is far more than I deserve for doing what any decent man should do. That is exactly why you deserve it, Manuelito said from his position beside the fire. A man who seeks honor rarely finds it. A man who simply does what is right, without thought of reward, shows that honor already lives in his heart. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of additional gifts, a magnificent paint horse to serve as a companion to Ranger, supplies for many months of travel, and a set of clothing worked with Apache designs that marked him as a friend to the tribe. But perhaps most precious was a small leather pouch containing sacred items that would protect him on his journeys. Marcus spent 3 more days in the Apache stronghold, each day bringing new understanding of a culture he had previously known only through fearful stories and army reports. He learned that the savage Apache were actually sophisticated people with complex laws, rich traditions, and a deep spiritual connection to the land that sustained them. He watched Apache children at play and was struck by their laughter and innocence so different from the bloodthirsty demons of frontier legend. He observed the careful way disputes were settled through council discussion rather than violence, and the reverence with which the elders were treated by younger members of the tribe. Most importantly, he saw how his rescue of Manuelito had changed the way these Apache viewed white men. Where before there had been only mistrust and hatred, now there was curiosity and a willingness to consider the possibility that not all whites were their enemies. You have given my people a great gift, Ayana told him as he prepared to leave. Not just my brother's life, but hope that peace between our peoples might be possible. Some of our young warriors have spoken of riding to white settlements not to raid, but to see if other white men might have hearts like yours. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility that came with such words. Ma'am, I hope they'll find good people if they do. But I have to warn you, not all whites will welcome Apache visitors, even peaceful ones. There's a lot of fear and hatred on both sides. Fear and hatred can be overcome, she replied with the wisdom of her years. It takes time, patience, and people willing to build bridges. You have shown that such bridges are possible. When Marcus finally prepared to leave, it seemed as though the entire village turned out to see him off. Manuelito, now able to stand with the aid of a walking stick, performed a final ceremony that formally recognized Marcus as a blood brother to the Apache people. Take this, the chief said, pressing a small carved stone into Marcus's hand. It is a sacred token that will identify you to any Apache as our friend. Keep it always. and know that you carry the prayers and good wishes of our people with you wherever you go." The ride out of the stronghold was both triumphant and melancholy. Marcus was honored beyond anything he had ever imagined, but he was also leaving behind people who had become genuinely dear to him. The magnificent paint horse they had given him, a mare named Windrunner, proved to be as intelligent and loyal as they had promised. As he crested the ridge that would take him back into the world of white settlements, Marcus turned for one last look at the hidden canyon. The Apache were gathered at the overlook, their hands raised in farewell, the morning sun catching the bright colors of their traditional clothing. In that moment, Marcus understood that his life had been forever changed. He was no longer just a drifting cowboy looking for work. He was a bridge between two worlds, a living testament to the possibility of peace and understanding between peoples who had known only war. The lance of sacred friendship rode in a place of honor on his saddle, its eagle feathers moving gently in the desert breeze. It would travel with him for the rest of his life, opening doors and creating opportunities he could never have imagined. But more than that, it would serve as a constant reminder of the day when a simple act of mercy had blossomed into something sacred and eternal. 5 years after his rescue of Manuelito, Marcus Thornfield had become a legend throughout the Arizona Territory. The story of the cowboy who saved an Apache chief and was adopted as a sacred friend had spread from trading post to trading post, from ranch to ranch, from army fort to frontier town. But Marcus had used his unique position for something far more important than personal fame. He had become the Southwest's most trusted mediator between white settlers and Apache tribes. His ranch, established on neutral ground between the reservation and white settlements, had become an unofficial embassy where disputes were settled peacefully and trade relationships flourished. The lance of sacred friendship, mounted prominently in his front room, served as a guarantee of safe passage for both whites and Apache who came to seek his help in resolving conflicts. On this particular morning, Marcus stood on his porch watching a sight that would have been impossible 5 years earlier: Apache and white children playing together in his front yard, while their parents conducted business inside his trading post. The paint horse Windrunner, now the mother of several magnificent foals, grazed peacefully alongside cattle and horses belonging to both white ranchers and Apache families. A cloud of dust on the horizon caught Marcus's attention, and he recognized the distinctive riding style of Apache warriors long before he could make out individual figures. As the group drew closer, his heart leaped with joy. At the head of the war party rode Manuelito himself, now fully healed, and as imposing as ever on his black stallion. But this wasn't just a social visit. Behind the chief rode 20 warriors, and behind them came something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat: a magnificent herd of horses unlike anything he had ever seen. There were at least 50 animals, their coats gleaming like jewels in the morning sun. Paints and palominos, chestnuts and blacks, each one clearly bred from the finest bloodlines the Apache possessed. As the procession approached his ranch, Marcus could see that this was a formal delegation. The warriors wore their finest regalia, and Manuelito himself was dressed in the full ceremonial attire of a paramount chief. Whatever brought them here was of the utmost importance. The children in the yard had stopped their games to stare in wonder at the magnificent horses, while their parents emerged from the trading post to witness what was clearly a historic moment. Marcus walked down from his porch to greet his old friend, noting that the chief's leg had healed perfectly straight and strong. "My brother," Manuelito said formally, dismounting with fluid grace, "I come to fulfill a sacred promise made 5 winters ago in Devil's Canyon." Marcus embraced the chief in the Apache fashion Ayana had taught him, then stepped back to look questioningly at the assembled warriors and the incredible herd of horses they had brought. "Manuelito, my friend, what promise? You've already given me more honors than any man deserves. The lance of sacred friendship, the protection of your people, your friendship itself, these are gifts beyond price." The old chief's eyes twinkled with something that might have been mischief. "When you found me broken and dying, you shared your last water though you faced death in the desert. You gave your strength to splint my leg, though you had no shelter from the burning Sunday. You risked your life to bring me to sacred water, though you knew my warriors might kill you for seeing our secret places. Any decent man would have done the same," Marcus protested, but Manuelito held up his hand for silence. "That is where you are wrong, my brother. In the 5 years since that day, 3 Apache have been found wounded by white men. All 3 were shot where they lay, their bodies left for the buzzards. Your actions were not ordinary, they were extraordinary, sacred, deserving of extraordinary recognition. The chief gestured toward the magnificent herd, and Marcus began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. These horses, Manuelito continued, represent 5 years of careful breeding, of selecting only the finest mares and the strongest stallions. Each animal has been trained by our best horsemen. Each one carries the bloodlines of legendary Apache war horses. This herd is our gift to you, not payment for what you did, for such kindness cannot be repaid, but recognition of the sacred bond between us. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes as the full meaning of the gesture sank in. This wasn't just a gift of valuable animals, it was the transfer of centuries of Apache horse breeding knowledge, a legacy of the finest bloodlines in the Southwest, wealth beyond anything he could have imagined. "Chief, I can't accept this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's too much, too valuable. These horses represent your people's heritage." "Exactly," Manuelito replied with a smile. "We give you our heritage because you have proven yourself worthy to carry it forward. These horses will found new bloodlines, will serve both Apache and white riders for generations to come. Through them, the bond between our peoples will grow stronger with each passing year." Cochise, now a full war chief himself, rode forward with a magnificent black stallion whose coat gleamed like polished obsidian. "This is Shadow Walker," he announced, "son of Wind Runner, and the greatest war horse in our history. He is trained to battle, trained to hunt, trained to carry his rider through any danger. He chooses his own master, and he has chosen you." The stallion approached Marcus directly, nuzzling his shoulder with obvious affection. It was clear that the animal had been specifically prepared for this moment, trained to accept Marcus as his partner. As the formal transfer of the herd began, with each horse being individually presented and its bloodline explained, word spread throughout the territory. White ranchers and Apache leaders, army officers and territorial officials, all came to witness what many were calling the greatest gesture of friendship ever made between the two peoples. But for Marcus, the true treasure wasn't the horses themselves, magnificent as they were. It was the knowledge that his simple act of mercy had grown into something that would outlast his own lifetime, creating bonds of friendship and understanding that would benefit generations yet unborn. That evening, as Apache and white families shared a great feast in celebration of the gift, Manuelito drew Marcus aside for a private conversation. "My friend," the chief said quietly, "I am an old man now, and I will not live to see all the changes coming to this land. But I have seen enough to know that the future belongs to those who can build bridges between peoples, not walls. You have shown that such bridges are possible." Marcus looked out over the crowd, Apache and white children playing together, their parents sharing food and stories, the magnificent horses that would carry the legacy of friendship into tomorrow, and understood that he had witnessed the birth of something new in the American West. "The real gift," he said to Manuelito, "isn't the horses. It's the proof that enemies can become family, that kindness is stronger than hatred, that one person's choice to do right can change the world." The old chief nodded with satisfaction. "Now you understand the true meaning of the sacred bond. It is not about what passes between individuals, but about what those individuals can build together for all who come after." Years later, when historians wrote about the peaceful coexistence that eventually developed between Apache and white settlers in the Arizona Territory, they would trace its origins to a single moment in Devil's Canyon, when a drifting cowboy chose compassion over fear. The horses from Manuelito's gift would indeed found new bloodlines that served riders throughout the Southwest for generations, but their greatest value was as living symbols of what became possible when honor met honor, and kindness was answered with gratitude. Marcus Thornfield never became a wealthy man in terms of gold or land, but he became rich in ways that mattered more. Rich in friendship, rich in respect, rich in the knowledge that his life had made a difference. The lance of sacred friendship remained in his family for generations, a reminder that the greatest adventures begin not with grand gestures or elaborate plans, but with the simple decision to help a fellow human being in need. In the end, the sacred bond that began with shared water in a desert canyon grew into something that transformed an entire territory, proving that kindness, like courage, has a power all its own to create miracles in the most unlikely places.